You've found Dreamtime Science, part classroom, part lullaby, entirely devoted to satisfying your curiosity while you find your way to sleep. You know, I've been thinking about how quietly amazing it is that living things don't just survive. They actually change and grow with their world around them. There's something remarkable about how organisms gently adjust, almost like a natural dance, to keep up with everything from tiny shifts in temperature to big changes in their homes. I can't wait to share some of the clever ways life finds its rhythm and keeps moving forward, even when the world feels a little unpredictable. If these gentle explorations bring you comfort, a quiet like or subscription would mean the world to me. Your support helps keep these peaceful journeys flowing. Before we begin, create your sanctuary, nestle into your chosen spot, let your muscles soften, and allow your breath to find its natural rhythm. In the hush of night, as the rest of the world slips into dreams, let us slip quietly through a different veil, a curtain woven from the threads of adaptation, survival, and transformation. Consider for a moment the way stories and science entwine in the twilight hours of our imagination. The pages of comic books and the silver glow of cinema screens have long given rise to beings who defy the limits of flesh and form. Among them, one figure stands out, Mystique, the enigmatic shapeshifter from the world of X-Men, whose very skin ripples and reconfigures with each flicker of her will. She is both protector and predator, a master of disguise, able to become anyone, to blend, to vanish, to survive. Yet, as spectacular as her abilities seem, they are not so distant from the natural world as one might suppose. The dance of survival, played out in every forest, reef, and field on Earth, is a ballet of transformation. Life, in all its myriad forms, is an endless improvisation, an orchestra of genes, bodies, and behaviors, tuning and retuning themselves in response to the shifting rhythms of environment and chance. This is the true marvel that beckons us tonight, the power of adaptation. Let us linger for a moment with Mystique herself. In the flickering frames of film, she stands, blue-skinned and gold-eyed, a living canvas upon which the world paints its demands. With a mere thought, her limbs contract or extend, her features melt and reform, her very structure unspooling and rewinding into the perfect mimicry of another. She is a vision of evolutionary possibility, a walking metaphor for survival in a world that never stops changing. To become the hunter or the hunted, the friend or the foe, the ruler or the rebel, this is her gift and her curse. But where does such power come from, outside the realm of fantasy? Drawn from the wellspring of biology, adaptation is both more subtle and more profound than any comic book superpower. It is not the instantaneous magic of a thought, but the slow, patient artistry of generations. Each creature, each plant, each microbe is a living record of trials faced and overcome, the chill of a sudden frost, the shadow of a hungry predator, the scarcity of food or water, the brilliance of a new competitor. The world is a stage, crowded with actors, and the script is never finished. Step quietly now into the undergrowth of a temperate forest, where the light is dappled and the air heavy with the scent of moss. Here, among the fallen leaves and the tangled roots, a drama unfolds beneath our very gaze. A moth, perched on the mottled bark of an oak, is almost invisible, her wings painted with the very pattern of lichen and shadow. To the sharp eyes of a hungry bird, she is nothing more than a patch of bark, a trick of the light. This is not magic, but the work of generations. Those moths, whose wings most closely matched their resting places, survived a little longer, laid a few more eggs, and so, over time, the camouflage deepened, perfected by the quiet hand of natural selection. It is here, in these small, often unnoticed moments, that the true dance of survival is choreographed. Adaptation is not only about protection, but also about opportunity. For every moth that vanishes against the bark, there is another creature learning to see through the disguise. For every predator that sharpens its senses, there is a prey, animal learning to slip away, to run a little faster, to freeze in just the right patch of shadow. The story is never static, never finished. It is a waltz that spans epochs, each partner pushing and pulling, giving and taking. Sometimes the changes are dramatic and swift, as when a sudden drought favors those able to store water or endure thirst. Other times the changes are so slow as to be invisible, the work of 1,000 generations, leaving only the faintest trace upon bone or feather. But let us not imagine adaptation as mere camouflage or simple trickery. The world is brimming with shapeshifters of every variety. Take the octopus, that silent conjurer of the deep. With skin that can change both color and texture, the octopus is a master of illusion, able to vanish among the rocks or become a living shadow. Its abilities, though extraordinary, are not the stuff of fantasy, but the result of a body finely tuned to its environment. Underneath the octopus's smooth, boneless form lies a tapestry of specialized cells, chromatophores that burst with pigment, iridophores that shimmer with reflected light, and papillae that can pucker and spike to mimic the roughness of coral or the smoothness of sand. With a twitch, an octopus can become a stone, a patch of algae, a flickering ghost, and more than that, it can learn, remember, and respond to the unique threats and opportunities of its world. Like Mystique, it is an artist of selfhood, a being who survives not by force or speed, but by the endless reinvention of form. Adaptation, then, is a conversation between body and world. It is the moth and the bird, the octopus and the coral, the snowshoe hare whose coat turns white with the coming of winter, blending into the drifts, only to darken again when spring returns. It is the cactus that stores water in swollen stems, the fennec fox whose ears radiate excess heat beneath the desert sun, the Arctic cod whose blood carries antifreeze proteins through the polar chill. Each is a stanza in the poem of life, a verse shaped by the press of necessity and the lure of possibility. Yet adaptation is not always a matter of survival against enemies or elements. Sometimes it is the gentle tug of cooperation, the intricate weaving of lives together. Consider the orchids that lure bees with the promise of nectar, their blossoms shaped into perfect mimicry of a female bee, so convincing that the male cannot help but attempt to mate. In the process, he carries pollen from flower to flower, a willing accomplice in the orchid's design. Here, shape-shifting is not about hiding, but about seduction, about the subtle art of persuasion. In other corners of the world, adaptation takes the form of resilience. The tardigrade, that microscopic marvel, can survive boiling, freezing, the vacuum of space itself. When conditions grow hostile, it curls into a ball, suspending its metabolism and waiting, patient as stone, for the return of gentler days. Its adaptation is not the quicksilver transformation of mystique, but the quiet mastery of endurance, a lesson writ small yet profound. Adaptation can also be an arms race, a ceaseless escalation between hunter and hunted, parasite and host. The cuckoo bird, infamous trickster of the avian world, lays its eggs in the nests of other birds, leaving them to be raised by unsuspecting foster parents. The host birds evolve keener senses to spot the foreign eggs. The cuckoos, in turn, refine their mimicry, their eggs matching the color, shape and size of the host's own. Each generation is a step in the dance, a move answered by a countermove, the script rewritten with every act. In the world of microbes, adaptation unfurls at dizzying speed. Bacteria, faced with the onslaught of antibiotics, evolve resistance in the blink of an evolutionary eye. A single mutation, a borrowed gene, and what was once a deadly poison becomes harmless or even useful. Here, the dance of survival is frenetic, the pace set by the quicksilver exchange of genetic material, the ruthless arithmetic of multiplication and death. But what, after all, is adaptation? At its heart, it is the process by which living things become better suited to the circumstances of their lives. It is both the sculptor and the clay, the silent force that shapes the beak of a finch, the fur of a bear, the cunning of a fox. It is never finished, never perfect, always in flux. The world changes, and life changes with it, each echoing the other in an endless refrain. To adapt is to survive, but it is also to become, to grow, to stretch, to risk. It is the willingness or the necessity to step into the unknown, to try and fail and try again. In this, the stories we tell of mystique, of heroes and monsters, of gods and mortals, are not so different from the story of life itself. We are fascinated by the power to transform, because, in some deep and ancient sense, it is the power that sustains us all. In the tangled corridors of our own bodies, adaptation is at work. The antibodies of our immune systems, crafted anew with each infection, learn the contours of a virus, the shape of a bacterium, and remember it for years to come. Our bones thicken or thin in response to the stresses we place upon them. Our muscles grow or fade with use or disuse. Even our minds reshape themselves, forging new connections, pruning old ones, as we learn and grow and change. This, too, is the dance of survival, not only in the wild places of the world, but within ourselves. We are, each of us, a mosaic of adaptations, a living testament to the challenges faced by our ancestors and the choices made in the quiet moments between crisis and calm. The colour of our skin, the texture of our hair, the curve of our spines. Each is a record, a trace, a memory. It is easy, in the hush of night, to imagine ourselves as separate from this grand ballet, spectators rather than dancers. Yet, even as we sit quietly pondering the marvels of transformation, we are participating in it. Our bodies, our thoughts, our very dreams are shaped by the forces of adaptation, by the ceaseless negotiation between what is and what might be. As we drift further into the heart of this night, let us carry with us the image of mystique, not as an impossible anomaly, but as a vivid emblem of the power that pulses through every living thing. Her shape-shifting is, in the end, a mirror held up to the world, a world where every creature, great and small, is engaged in the art of becoming. The ceaseless ballet of life swirls on, each step guided by the twin forces of necessity and chance. Somewhere, beneath the waves, an octopus slips into a new disguise. In the dappled forest, a moth vanishes into bark. In the cold, a bear grows thicker fur. The world is alive with transformation, each moment a testament to the power and grace of adaptation. And so, as the night deepens and the shadows lengthen, the dance continues, unseen, unending, ever-changing, waiting for us to take the next step, to peer a little closer, to listen for the music that guides us all. In the gentle hush of the evening, the living world draws a quiet breath. Beneath the stillness, however, the ceaseless churn of life's machinery continues, unseen, unhurried, and astonishingly intricate. In this deepening dusk, we turn our senses inward, peeling back the veils that shroud the engine of evolution, to observe the hidden artisans labouring within every cell and every lineage. This is the realm where adaptation is forged, not as a singular act, but as an endless, interconnected ballet of mutation, selection, and chance, a performance that has shaped the tapestry of life through epochs uncounted. Let us pause and linger for a heartbeat on the smallest origin, the mutation. The word itself carries the rhythm of change, a subtle shift from what was to what might be. At its heart, a mutation is a change in the genetic script, a single letter swapped, erased, or inserted among the 3 billion that compose the human genome, or the millions in a bacterium's more modest book of life. To the untrained eye, such a change might seem negligible, a drop in a boundless ocean. Yet, like the trembling of one domino, even the humblest alteration can ripple outward, touching form, function, and fate. Within the nucleus of a cell, the DNA molecule coils like a double helix staircase, each step composed of pairs of chemical bases, adenine with thymine, guanine with cytosine, held together by bonds as delicate as they are strong. The cell's machinery copies this code with exquisite precision, but perfection is the enemy of novelty. Occasionally, an error slips through, a base is replaced, a segment duplicated, a stretch lost to some molecular accident. Cosmic rays from the sky, reactive chemicals within the cytoplasm, or the mere weariness of age may spark these changes. Most mutations are as fleeting as a moth's shadow, silent, inconsequential, sometimes even harmful, but a rare few open doors to new possibilities. Beyond the single letter, there is a grander architecture of change. Genes may be shuffled, entire chromosomes rearranged, or genetic material borrowed from distant cousins through the mysterious mechanism of horizontal gene transfer, a phenomenon common in the microbial realms, where bacteria exchange genetic secrets like whispers in the night. These exchanges can arm a bacterium with resistance to antibiotics in the space of a single generation, a testament to the swift and unpredictable nature of mutation as the raw material of adaptation. But what becomes of these changes? Here we encounter the patient sculptor, natural selection. This is the process most often invoked when we speak of evolution, a phrase so often simplified to survival of the fittest, a notion that echoes with the clangor of competition and the triumph of strength. Yet, to see selection only as a ruthless culling is to misunderstand its artistry. Nature's selection is neither cruel nor kind, but indifferent, an editor that reads the story of each life and determines, through the quiet arithmetic of birth and death, which versions of a gene or trait will persist and which will fade into oblivion. Imagine a population of moths living in a forest mottled with shadows. Some moths are pale, others dark. When the forest is clean and the bark light, pale moths vanish into the background and are less likely to be plucked by hungry birds. But when soot from distant factories stains the trees black, the advantage shifts. Now the dark moths are the ones who melt into obscurity, and the pale become easy prey. This is the famous case of the peppered moth, a living testament to the dance between mutation and selection. The gene for dark coloration was always there, a hidden card in the genetic deck, but only when the world changed did it become the winning hand. Yet even this classic tale conceals deeper currents. The advantage of a trait depends not only on the environment, but also on the company it keeps, on the presence of predators, competitors and allies, on the climate and the chemical composition of the soil, on fortunes that waver from season to season. What is fit in one era may be a liability in the next. Nature's favour is fickle, and the tapestry of adaptation is woven with threads of chance. Consider, too, the role of genetic drift, a force as quiet and inexorable as the wind. In large populations, the mathematics of inheritance smooths out the vagaries of luck, and selection tends to prevail. But in small populations, randomness reigns. A storm may sweep away 100 beetles, leaving behind a handful whose traits are not the best adapted, but merely the luckiest survivors. Their genes become the foundation of future generations, not because of superiority, but through the accident of persistence. Over time, rare traits may become common, or common traits may vanish, guided not by advantage, but by the roll of life's celestial dice. This is not just theoretical musing. On remote islands, where populations are small and isolated, genetic drift has sculpted creatures of peculiar form and habit. The flightless cormorants of the Galapagos, the dwarfed elephants of ancient Mediterranean isles, and the unique marsupials of Australia all bear the mark of adaptation shaped as much by chance as by necessity. Their stories remind us that evolution is not a straight road, but a meandering path through a landscape littered with the footprints of fortune and misfortune alike. As we follow this path deeper into the labyrinth, the boundaries between adaptation and accident blur further. Some traits emerge not because they serve a direct purpose, but as byproducts, side effects of other changes. The human chin, for example, is an anatomical puzzle. It seems to serve no clear function, and yet it persists. Some biologists suspect it is merely an accident of facial reorganization, as our jaws shrank and our speech flourished. Such quirks are known as spandrels, borrowing a term from architecture, the lovely triangular spaces that arise where arches meet, unplanned yet inevitable. The mechanisms of adaptation are not limited to the visible. Within every organism, hidden adaptations unfold, invisible to the naked eye. Consider the molecular ballet of hemoglobin, the protein that ferries oxygen through our blood. In high-altitude dwellers, Tibetans, Andeans, and Ethiopian highlanders, distinct mutations in the hemoglobin gene allow them to thrive where the air is thin. Curiously, each population has evolved its own solution, a case of convergent evolution, different genetic paths leading to the same adaptive summit. Here, the grandeur of natural selection is revealed not as a singular race, but as a branching river, each tributary finding its own way to the sea. Yet life's solutions are rarely perfect. Evolution, after all, is a tinkerer, not an engineer. It works with what is at hand, repurposing old parts for new uses, jury-rigging solutions that are good enough for the moment, if not for eternity. The recurrent laryngeal nerve in giraffes is a famous example. Rather than taking a direct route from brain to voice box, it loops all the way down the neck and back again, a legacy of fish ancestors whose necks were short and simple. Such inefficiencies are the fingerprints of history, reminders that adaptation proceeds by incremental steps, never by wholesale reinvention. Among the most beguiling aspects of adaptation is its unpredictability. The interplay of mutation, selection, and drift ensures that the future of any lineage is shrouded in uncertainty. Some mutations lie dormant for generations, their effects masked by the presence of other genes, until a change in the environment or a chance recombination brings them to light. The sickle cell trait is one such paradox. On its own, the mutation causes a debilitating blood disorder. But in regions where malaria is rampant, carriers of one copy of the sickle gene are resistant to the parasite, a bittersweet adaptation, balancing harm and benefit on the razor's edge. The story of adaptation is further complicated by the phenomenon of gene flow, the movement of genes between populations. When individuals migrate, their genes mingle with those of their new neighbors, introducing fresh variants and blurring the boundaries between groups. Sometimes this flow brings beneficial traits, as when ancient humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, acquiring genes that aided in immunity or adaptation to cold. At other times, gene flow dilutes local adaptations, creating tension between the pull of homogenization and the push of divergence. Adaptation also unfolds at the level of communities and ecosystems. The flower and the pollinator are locked in a slow, reciprocal waltz, each shaping the other's evolution in an ongoing dialogue. Orchids with spurs as long as a hummingbird's beak, figs and wasps entwined in mutual dependency, predators and prey engaged in an arms race of offense and defense. These are the stories of coevolution, where adaptation is not a solitary endeavor, but a chorus of voices, each responding to the others in a symphony of life. Time, too, is an essential ingredient. The pace of adaptation varies wildly, from the slow, steady accumulation of changes over millennia to the sudden leaps prompted by catastrophe or opportunity. The fossil record bears witness to both gradual transitions and abrupt radiations, such as the explosive diversification of mammals after the demise of the dinosaurs. Sometimes the environment shifts so rapidly that adaptation cannot keep pace, and extinction claims its due. At other times, a species may persist in a state of stasis, finely attuned to a stable world, awaiting the next turn of the evolutionary wheel. Chance, environment, and time. These are the threads that weave the fabric of adaptation. To think of evolution as a mere struggle for supremacy is to see only the surface. Beneath, there is a deeper logic, a balance of order and chaos, constraint and possibility. Each organism is both the product of its ancestry and the author of its own future, a participant in a grand experiment whose outcome is never certain. As night deepens, let your mind drift among these patterns, the spirals and branches of the evolutionary maze. Picture the ceaseless play of molecules in the heart of a cell, the silent drift of genes through populations, the slow, inexorable shaping of wings, shells, and songs. The tapestry of complexity is not woven by competition alone, but by a multitude of hands, mutations chance, selections scrutiny, drifts whimsy, and the long, slow pulse of time. Beyond the shadows, other mysteries await. The emergence of entirely new forms, the sudden flowering of innovation, the moments when evolution leaps rather than walks. In the hush of this unfolding night, we sense the approach of such wonders, poised on the edge of possibility, waiting to be revealed. Through the centuries, we have peered into the workings of life with instruments both literal and metaphorical, lenses that magnify the subtle and frameworks that clarify the profound. The story of how we study adaptation is itself an odyssey of curiosity, ingenuity, and ever-deepening wonder. Each generation inherits not only answers, but better questions and sharper tools. In the stillness of this night, as thoughts drift gently between past and future, let us journey through the looking glass of discovery, tracing how our eyes and minds have learned to see the slow alchemy of change that adaptation weaves. Begin for a moment in the 1830s, where a young naturalist leans over the gunwale of HMS Beagle, notebook in hand, wind tangling his hair. Charles Darwin, with a mind as hungry as the waves were restless, began his observations, not with grand theoretical machinery, but with a willingness to notice the world as it was. On the Galapagos Islands, those lonely volcanic specks scattered like jewels in the Pacific, he sketched finches with beaks of every conceivable shape, thick and crushing, slender and probing, curved like a scythe or straight as a pin. Each form, he realized, reflected a different diet, a different way of life, molded by the demands and opportunities of its environment. Darwin's method was deceptively simple: observe, compare, record, reflect. But his genius lay in the rigor with which he questioned the familiar, and in the clarity with which he mapped difference onto cause. He gathered beetles in English woods, watched mockingbirds flit on distant shores, catalogued barnacle shells, and measured the distances between seeds and their dispersing winds. Gradually, a pattern emerged, a tapestry of variation, both minute and magnificent, hinting at deep currents beneath the surface. It was not yet the age of genetics or molecular biology. The tools were paper, pen, patience, and a keen eye. But these were enough to launch a revolution in thought. Darwin's notebooks, brimming with sketches and stray thoughts, became the crucibles of hypothesis. He began to reason. If variation exists, and if some variations confer even the smallest advantage in survival or reproduction, then over time those traits will become more common, like favored notes in an evolving melody. Adaptation, he proposed, is the sculptor's hand, invisible but inexorable. Yet the story of adaptation study did not end with Darwin's insight. Rather, it set the stage for generations of scientists to devise new ways of seeing, measuring, and testing the mechanisms that drive change. As the decades unfurled, each wave of discovery brought new questions, and with them, new instruments for peering deeper into nature's secrets. Consider for a time the age of the microscope. In the latter half of the 19th century, as glassmakers perfected their craft, the invisible became visible. Cells, once mere abstractions, revealed their complex interiors, nuclei, mitochondria, and the intricate machinery of life. Evolution was no longer a matter of distant speculation, but a process inscribed in the very structure of living things. But even the finest lens could not yet resolve the true code of life. For that, the world had to wait until the dawn of the 20th century, when a quiet monk's experiments with peas, performed decades before in a Moravian monastery's garden, were finally recognized for their significance. Gregor Mendel, with his careful crosses and meticulous tallies, showed that traits are passed from parent to offspring in discrete units, what we now call genes. Mendel's pea plants, some tall, some short, some bearing round seeds, others wrinkled, became the first experimental population, a model of heredity in action. His method was mathematical as much as botanical: count, categorize, predict. The ratios he observed hinted at a hidden architecture beneath the flux of adaptation, a set of rules governing how new traits could arise and spread. The synthesis of Darwin's natural selection and Mendel's genetics would take decades, but when it came, it transformed the science of adaptation into a discipline of both observation and experiment. No longer did scientists have to wait for nature to reveal her secrets over millennia. They could set up experiments, manipulate conditions, and watch evolution in real time. One of the classic stories, the kind that lingers in textbooks and firesides alike, is that of the peppered moth, Biston betularia, whose wings became a living record of environmental upheaval. In the countryside of pre-industrial England, these moths flourished with wings of pale, speckled grey, blending seamlessly against lichen-covered tree trunks. But as coal smoke darkened the forests, the light lichen withered, and the bark grew black with soot. Suddenly, the once inconspicuous moths stood out like beacons, easy prey for hungry birds. Then, from the margins, a rare form emerged, a moth with charcoal-black wings. Before the Industrial Revolution, this form was scarcely seen. Now it spread rapidly, its colouring a perfect disguise on soot-darkened trees. In just a few decades, the black melanic variety outnumbered its pale cousins, an evolutionary drama unfolding within a single human lifetime. But how could one be sure? Was this truly natural selection at work, or mere coincidence? In the 1950s, a British physician named Bernard Kettlewell sought to answer this question with an experiment as elegant as it was ambitious. He released marked moths, both pale and dark, onto tree trunks in polluted and unpolluted woodlands, then watched as birds hunted them. His observations were clear. In soot-blackened forests, the black moths survived at higher rates. In clean woods, the pale forms had the advantage. Here was adaptation, not as distant theory, but as a fact observed, measured, and recorded. Kettlewell's work was not without controversy. Later scientists critiqued and refined his methods, seeking to rule out every possible artifact or bias. But the essence remains. The peppered moth is a window into how we study adaptation, using experiments that bridge the gap between nature's complexity and scientific clarity. As the 20th century progressed, the scale and precision of such studies multiplied. Adaptation could be measured in fruit flies bred in laboratory bottles, in bacteria evolving antibiotic resistance over days or weeks, in stickleback fish adapting to new lakes formed by retreating glaciers. Each experiment became a microcosm, a world in miniature where the push and pull of selection, chance, and inheritance could be traced with careful hands and watchful eyes. Consider the fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster, a creature so small and unassuming it might escape notice altogether. Yet in the hands of geneticists it became a model organism, its brief life cycle and prodigious fertility making it ideal for tracking adaptation over generations. By exposing populations to new environments, different temperatures, novel chemicals, unfamiliar food sources, scientists could watch as traits shifted, as mutations arose and spread, as genes and environments danced their intricate pas de deux. In these glass vials and flasks, adaptation was no longer a process of the distant past, but a phenomenon of the present, unfolding on the laboratory bench. With each generation, patterns emerged. Flies became more tolerant of heat or cold, more resistant to toxins, more adept at exploiting new resources. The mechanisms could now be dissected in detail, mutations pinpointed, gene frequencies measured, the tempo and mode of evolution charted with unprecedented precision. Yet the laboratory, for all its control, can never fully capture the riotous complexity of the wild. To truly understand adaptation, scientists have devised ingenious ways of bridging these worlds. In long-term field studies, they tag birds on remote islands, track wolves across snowy tundra, monitor flowering plants as climates shift and seasons blur. Each system offers its own lessons, its own surprises. On the Galapagos, for example, generations of the Grants, Peter and Rosemary, biologists and partners, have lived among the finches that first inspired Darwin. By banding individual birds, measuring their beaks, and recording their fates across years of drought and plenty, the Grants have watched selection in real time. In dry years, when only the toughest seeds survive, birds with larger, stronger beaks thrive. In wet years, the balance shifts, and smaller beaked birds gain the edge. Here, adaptation is not a distant glacial process, but a pulse quickened by every gust of wind and drop of rain. As the tools of genetics advanced, so too did our capacity to peer deeper into the machinery of adaptation. The discovery of DNA's double helix in 1953 marked a turning point, revealing the molecular script that underlies every living thing. Soon, scientists could sequence genes, compare the genomes of individuals and species, and ask with unprecedented precision, what changes, at the level of code, make one organism better suited than another to its world? In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the pace of insight accelerated. Whole genomes could be sequenced in days, revealing the tangled histories of adaptation written in the language of nucleotides, A, T, C, and G. By comparing the DNA of high-altitude Tibetans with that of lowland relatives, researchers discovered mutations in genes that help blood carry oxygen more efficiently, an adaptation to the thin air of the Himalayas. In Arctic fish, anti-freeze proteins evolved to keep blood liquid in icy seas, their genetic blueprints now laid bare for all to see. But more than just cataloguing differences, modern geneticists can now replay evolutionary histories, reconstructing how adaptation unfolded. By editing genes in the laboratory using tools like CRISPR, they can introduce or remove mutations, testing their effects in living cells or whole organisms. The questions that Darwin could only ponder, what is the cause of this variation? How does it arise? Can now be probed with molecular precision, and as the data has burgeoned, so too has the need for new ways to make sense of it all. Enter the age of artificial intelligence, where algorithms trained on vast datasets can discern patterns invisible to the naked eye. Machine learning systems, fed with the genomes of thousands of individuals, can tease apart the subtle signals of selection from the noise of genetic drift. They can predict, with growing accuracy, which mutations are likely to confer resistance to disease, or adaptation to drought, or tolerance to toxins. Artificial intelligence has become a new kind of lens, one that can scan whole ecosystems at once. Satellite images track the greening of forests or the bleaching of coral reefs. Automated sensors record the movements of animals across continents. Bioinformatics tools sift through oceans of sequence data, searching for the fingerprints of adaptation in every corner of the biosphere. Yet for all these advances, the heart of the matter remains unchanged. Adaptation is a story told in many voices, observed with many tools. It is the mark of moths on bark, of genes in a double helix, of algorithms searching for meaning in the chaos of life's diversity. It is a process that unfolds on every scale, from the flicker of a protein folding to the slow reshaping of landscapes by wind and water and living things. As we gaze through these many looking glasses, Darwin's notebook, Mendel's garden, the electron microscope's sharp gaze, the shimmering code of genomes, the cold logic of artificial minds, we are reminded that every tool is a way of asking, what is here? What has changed? Why does this pattern emerge and not another? In the quiet interlude between observation and understanding, science finds its poetry. The methods we devise are not just ways to measure, but ways to see, to bring into focus the hidden harmonies and restless flux that adaptation describes. Each new tool, each new experiment, is another window opened onto a world forever in motion, forever unfinished. And so, as the night deepens and the hush of curiosity settles, we turn our gaze toward the horizon of what remains unknown. For every question answered, a dozen more arise. What is the future of adaptation as environments shift faster than ever before? How will our tools evolve, and what new insights will they reveal? The journey through the looking glass is never truly complete. It is a path of endless discovery, winding onward into the mystery of life's unfolding story. Now, in the gentle hush of this late hour, let us settle into the last stretch of our journey, a winding path that turns inward even as it gazes outward, threading the story of adaptation through the tapestry of our own lives. The tale of adaptation is not merely a chronicle of distant epochs and unfamiliar creatures. It is our story too, a living, breathing thread that weaves through every heartbeat, every shiver, every hope and fear. Tonight, as the world outside fades into darkness and your mind drifts toward the liminal space between waking and sleep, we will reflect on how adaptation is not just something we witness in the wild or read about in books, but something we partake in consciously and unconsciously every day. For as long as there have been humans, adaptation has been our constant companion. It is there in the earliest sparks of intelligence that glimmered in the eyes of our ancestors crouched in the tall grasses of the savannah. It is there in the calloused hands that learned to shape stone, in the clever minds that discovered how to harness fire, in the restless feet that carried our kind across continents and through ages. The human animal is, above all, an adapter, a species whose survival has depended not on brute strength or sharp claws, but on a nimble mind and a restless curiosity, a capacity to change ourselves and our world. Consider for a moment the astonishing landscapes our species has inhabited, from the humid, tangled forests of equatorial Africa to the icy tundra of the Arctic, from the parched deserts of the Sahara to the wind-scoured plateaus of Tibet. Humans have found ways to persist and thrive. Each new environment posed its own challenges: biting cold, searing heat, thin air, unfamiliar predators, scarce water, novel diseases. In response, our bodies changed in subtle ways. Skin pigments shifted to balance the gifts and dangers of sunlight. Noses narrowed or widened to warm or moisten the air. Bodies grew stockier or more slender to conserve or release heat. Beneath the skin, immune systems adapted to local pathogens, while genes for digesting milk or starch swept through populations when the foods of survival changed. But human adaptation has never been merely biological. Far more than any other species, we have learned to shape our environment to suit ourselves, and paradoxically, to shape ourselves in the process. We invented clothing to shield us from the elements, built shelters to keep out the wind and rain, fashioned tools to hunt, to farm, to create. Our cultures grew ever more complex, spinning intricate webs of language, art, and tradition that allowed knowledge to be passed from one generation to the next. In this way, adaptation leapt beyond the slow clockwork of genetic change and entered the fast currents of culture and technology. It is tempting to believe that this power sets us apart, that our intelligence has lifted us above the constraints that bind the rest of life. Yet if we look closely, we see that the roots of adaptation, variation, selection, inheritance still twine through the human story. Our technologies, our societies, our very ways of thinking are shaped by the same forces that guided the evolution of finches or wolves or whales. Ideas compete, mutate, and spread like genes. Cultures rise and fall, shaped by the pressures of environment and circumstance. Our bodies, too, continue to respond to the world we have made. We are taller now, on average, than a century ago, a quiet testament to better nutrition and health. Diseases that once ravaged populations now submit to the ingenuity of vaccines and treatments, though new challenges always arise in their place. Yet for all our ingenuity, we are not immune to the currents of change. The world we have fashioned is not static, but dynamic, subject to the same restless forces that have always sculpted life on Earth. And now, in this present moment, we find ourselves at a crossroads, humans as both architects and subjects of a world in flux. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the great looming spectre of climate change. It is a transformation of our own making, a consequence of choices and technologies that once seemed to promise only progress. The atmosphere, that thin, fragile envelope that cradles all life, has become a theatre of unintended consequences. Greenhouse gases, released by the burning of ancient sunlight in the form of coal, oil, and gas, trap heat that would otherwise escape into the void. Seasons shift and blur, storms gather new fury, oceans rise inch by inch, swallowing the low-lying margins of continents. Across the globe, rhythms that once seemed eternal, when the rains fall, when the flowers bloom, where the fish swim, are coming unmoored. Adaptation, always a quiet background hum, becomes a clarion call in times of upheaval. How do we, as a species, respond to the changes we have set in motion? What lessons can we draw from the long, unbroken chain of life's resilience, stretching back across billions of years? One lesson, perhaps, is humility. For all our cleverness, we are not exempt from the laws that govern life. The forces that shaped the first single-celled organisms, that scrawled the blueprints of trilobites and trees and tigers, also shape us. Our cities, our economies, our ways of living are not immune to drought or flood, to crop failures or pandemics. The story of adaptation is, at its heart, a story of limits, of what can be endured, of what must be changed, of how life bends but does not always break. There are tipping points, thresholds beyond which adaptation becomes impossible and extinction claims its due. Recognizing these limits is not a counsel of despair but of wisdom. It reminds us that to flourish we must remain attentive, responsive, open to change. Another lesson is solidarity. Adaptation, though sometimes cast as a solitary struggle, is often a collective endeavor. The most successful species are those that cooperate, that share information, that pool their strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. Humans, more than any other animal, are social adapters. Our greatest achievements, the taming of fire, the building of cities, the decoding of the genome have arisen from collaboration. In the face of global challenges, no single individual or nation can adapt alone. The atmosphere belongs to everyone and to no one. The rising seas, the shifting patterns of disease, the collapse of fisheries, all cross the invisible lines we draw on maps. If we are to adapt, we must do so together, weaving a fabric of cooperation that is as robust and flexible as any ecosystem. A third lesson is anticipation. Evolution, for all its genius, is a slow sculptor, working patiently with the materials at hand. Cultural adaptation, in contrast, can move with breathtaking speed. We have the capacity to foresee, to model, to imagine futures that have not yet come to pass. This gift is both a blessing and a burden. It allows us to prepare, to mitigate, to change course before disaster strikes. But it also demands that we look beyond our immediate needs, that we value the future as much as the present. The choices we make today, about energy, about land, about how we treat the living world, will echo for generations. In this, we are called not just to adapt, but to become stewards, caring for a world we did not make and cannot fully control. In the face of climate change, adaptation takes many forms. Some are technological, seawalls and drought-resistant crops, solar panels and wind turbines, vaccines and early warning systems. Some are social, new codes of behavior, migration to safer ground, the forging of alliances and agreements. And some are psychological, even spiritual, the cultivation of resilience, the capacity to endure uncertainty, the willingness to let go of old ways that no longer serve. Yet there is danger too in assuming that adaptation is always possible, always sufficient. Not every species survives a mass extinction. Not every culture endures a time of turmoil. There is, in the history of life, a sobering lesson, that change can outpace the ability to adapt, that some branches of the tree of life are pruned away forever. For the first time, we possess the knowledge to see this happening in real time, to bear witness as coral reefs bleach and forests burn, as creatures great and small slip into the silence of extinction. In this there is grief, but also a call to responsibility. We are not mere spectators, but actors in the unfolding drama. Our choices matter, and so we return to the heart of our inquiry. What does it mean to adapt, to be human in an age of transformation? The answer, perhaps, lies in the recognition that adaptation is not a destination, but a process, a dance between stability and change, between what endures and what must be let go. It is the art of listening, listening to the whisper of genes, the murmur of ecosystems, the voices of those who have come before and those yet to be born. It is the willingness to be changed by what we encounter, to learn and unlearn, to risk and to hope. There is a quiet power in this stance. It is the power that allowed our ancestors to shape flint into tools, to follow herds across frozen plains, to dream up stories that bound them together in meaning and purpose. It is the power that allowed farmers to coax life from the soil, doctors to conquer disease, poets to envision worlds not yet made. And it is the power we will need in the years to come, as the world grows stranger and the old certainties fall away. Perhaps in the end, adaptation is not merely a matter of survival, but of flourishing, of finding ways to live richly and meaningfully in a world that is always in flux. It is the capacity to delight in difference, to embrace novelty, to find beauty in the unexpected. It is the courage to change and the wisdom to know what to hold fast. As you lie here, suspended between this day and the next, you may sense the deep pulse of this story within yourself. Every breath, every thought is a kind of adaptation, a response to the shifting demands of body and mind, of memory and dream. You are, in this moment, part of an unbroken lineage, a shimmering thread that stretches back to the first spark of life and forward into futures unknown. The genes in your cells, the language on your tongue, the dreams in your heart, all are gifts of adaptation, shaped by forces vast and ancient yet utterly personal. And as the world outside your window turns, as night yields to dawn, and the next chapter of our shared story begins to unfold, the ancient dance of adaptation continues. New challenges will arise, some foreseen, others unimaginable. New solutions will be dreamed into being. New forms of life will take their place on the stage of existence. The future is not written, but shaped, moment by moment, by the choices we make, the questions we ask, the courage with which we face the unknown. In the stillness of this night, as your thoughts drift and your body rests, allow yourself to rest in the knowledge that adaptation is not a solitary burden, but a shared inheritance, a song sung by all living things, in harmony and in discord, through cycles of loss and renewal. The story is not finished. It continues, as it always has, in the quiet spaces between one heartbeat and the next, in the gentle unfolding of life's endless, astonishing variety. And so the night deepens. The arc of adaptation bends forward, carrying us quietly into what lies beyond the horizon. As our journey through the delicate dance of adaptation drifts to a close, we watch like stardust settling softly after a comet tail fading into the hush of space. May your thoughts wander gently among the ever-changing rhythms of life, and when the night sky calls you back, we'll be here with more Dreamtime tales to soothe your curious heart.